Looking to be more productive and jump those hurdles of change and challenge easier? You've come to the right place. Welcome to Thrive in Life with your hosts, Zaheen Nanji.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive in Life show, where we help you embrace change, overcome adversity, and flex your attitude. This show is about you and about how to just cope with any changes that are taking place or any challenges that you have. So this is episode number 29. And if you've missed the last 28 episodes, then I encourage you to either go on my website at zaheennanji.com and binge watch the other 28, or you can go on iTunes and subscribe to the podcast Thrive in Life. Today we have an amazing guest, Kathryn Fitzwilliam. And I met her last year on a speakers group that we belong to, and I loved her story. And I really wanted for her to come on and explain her journey to the viewers and the listeners. So for those of you listening on the podcast, know that we are recording this as a video, which then gets converted into a podcast. But we'll make sure that if we talk about anything, we'll make sure that we will take into consideration that there's some people who are listening and not watching. Okay, so let me read the bio for Kathryn. Kathryn is a marketing executive who has her own marketing practice in Toronto, Canada, where she lives with her husband and her 2 children. In 2011, after many challenging months, Kathryn's daughter was diagnosed with clinical depression. For the next 3 years, Kathryn worked to understand the illness, how to support recovery, and how to parent differently. So this is her story about how she overcame the challenge with one of her own kids going through something that she didn't understand at first. Kathryn, come on and say hi to everyone.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here.
Yes.
Thanks.
And when we're recording, it is in the morning, so that's right. Okay, so Kathryn, let's just get right into your story. How did you know that you had a problem?
Well, interestingly enough, we didn't at first, and I think that's a really important point. The behaviors that we were noticing with our daughter were the kinds of things that you expect in teens. She was staying up all night. She was sleeping in. She was not doing her assignments at school. She was moody. She was grumpy. And it's really important for people to know that initially these things you think are normal teen behavior until they're not. And in our case, we were having increasingly difficult fights at home, and we're not a family who fights. She stopped going to school, and then eventually we learned that she had been cutting herself, and that scared us tremendously, and that's when we knew we had to do something.
Wow. So this is something that happened in her teenage years, and this was something new that hadn't happened before, and now all of a sudden there's a change in behavior.
Absolutely. And we wondered whether it was going to a new school. We wondered all sorts of things. And then we thought, well, maybe it's just hormones raging, because it begins in a very kind of innocuous way. And we sort of shook our heads and said, well, this is what teen behavior is, until it became absolutely obvious that this was not healthy.
Right. Now, how did you and your husband, I guess, deal with the crisis that once you saw this, what happened next?
I think the first thing that happened was my husband and I sat down and had a long conversation. And I would say it's really important to get on the same page as parents. And we realized that we were probably dealing with something that wasn't a behavioral issue. It was probably an illness. And we had to wrap our heads around the fact that our responses to this needed to be similar to any parent dealing with a child who's not well. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing we did was immediately reached out to the family doctor, because, again, if you follow the model of illness, what's the first thing you do when you think your child is sick is you call the doctor.
Yes.
And we encouraged her, and our daughter knew that something wasn't right. And so she was happy to go to the doctor and have a conversation because she likes her doctor. Our family doctor was wonderful. She recommended and referred us to some therapist help. And so we immediately sort of started getting some help around us. The next thing I contacted the school because I felt it was really important that her school know that we were not dealing with either a truancy issue or a behavioral issue or not doing the homework, that this was a mental issue or a medical issue, I should say, and that we all needed to be working together to help solve an illness for our child. And then lastly, and one of the important things for my husband and I is he and I together went to see a family therapist.
Wow.
Get coaching and advice as parents as to how to deal with a child dealing with these problems. And it was the best thing we could have done. It was enormously helpful, and it would be something that I would recommend to anybody.
That's so great that you mentioned that, because I like the way you actually put it out, that you had a conversation with your husband first, and then you called your doctor, which is the first thing that you think about, right? Like, who can help me? But then you also spoke to your daughter to say, hey, you know what? There is something going on. And she recognized that and she acknowledged that, which is huge in itself. And then you and your husband had to find ways that you could help your daughter. So you went and looked for help.
Yes.
It wasn't something that you thought, we can deal with this. But you actually said, no, we need help because this is something new for us and we don't know how to deal with it. Yes?
Absolutely. And if your child breaks his or her leg, you don't say to yourself as a parent, well, I'll handle it myself. You recognize that a medical crisis needs professional help. And it's the one thing that I would say to parents everywhere. The moment you begin to worry about this, as these thoughts cross your mind, seek some help, if only just to get another point of view. To confirm or deny the worries that you have, because you can't deal with this alone.
Yeah. I can't imagine what you may have been going through as a mother, because I too have a daughter and she's only 11, but what if she goes through this sometimes or going through different issues, even now when she gets hurt or she comes home about, different things, like my heart just aches for her.
I know. It is just, it's just awful. And, one of the great pieces of advice I heard from one of the professionals, she said to me, being a parent, you've got to grow rhinoceros skin. You just have to. And I would just remind myself of that on bad days. Just, toughen up because we're in this for a while.
Yeah. So I'm sure after speaking to your doctor and going through all this, what were some of the challenges that you had to face now after you're learning all these things and just going to the doctor? What were some of the things that you went through?
There are a lot of them. The first, it is very common, and it took place with the case of my daughter, it's very common for patients who are suffering from depression to refuse treatment.
Yes.
And unlike other, again, physical diseases, it's not a hallmark of a cancer patient to refuse treatment, but it is a hallmark of depression. And so as a parent, you're beside yourself because you're frustrated and you're frightened about what you're actually dealing with. And the patient is saying, I'm not playing this game. I'm not going to participate. Just leave me alone. And of course you can't. So that was the first thing, the frustration and the panic of my daughter refusing treatment. Connected to that is, unlike physical diseases, there isn't a classic roadmap for something like depression. I mean, you can't take a blood test or look at somebody's blood pressure or look at charts and graphs and say your cholesterol level is X and it needs to be Y. So here's the course of treatment we're going to take to get that needle to move. There aren't those signs along the way. And so you have to kind of figure out what resources do you need? How long will their treatment be required? And that requires ongoing discussion and ongoing research with professionals as to what you have to do. So there's this sense of frustration and panic and a sense of confusion because you're sort of in a dark hole. So we needed to, really talk to health professionals and psychiatrists and all sorts of individuals to help us figure out what the roadmap was. And I would say having a family therapist for my husband and I alone was hugely helpful in helping us decipher some of these issues.
So with the therapist, did he or she explain what kind of language to use, how to approach the situation?
Absolutely. And because, there were so many different behaviors taking place from my daughter, and, my husband and I knew we needed to parent differently, but we didn't really know what that looked like. And certainly we were nervous. We didn't want to exacerbate the situation. We didn't want to send her into a tailspin. So we got a lot of coaching from this therapist who helped us understand what kind of behaviors to expect from this disease, what kind of means to help guide our daughter through it. And she gave us wonderful pieces of advice. There were moments in time when we'd say, oh, this happened this week. And she'd look at us and she'd say, that's normal. Don't worry about that. But then, there would be something else we'd talk about. And she'd say, okay, now that's something that you really want to do some work on. And so it really helped us differentiate what to be nervous about and what not, because you could imagine in the position we were in, we were just nervous about everything.
Yeah, of course. When you went through all this, did you now look back at it and say, wow, I learned so much from this situation? What kind of lessons would you give to the listeners and the viewers about what you went through and what you learned from that? Because that's what I like to teach, is that when you want to thrive in life, you will always go through hurdles, but always come out of it looking back, thinking, what did I learn from that? And how did that make me stronger?
Yes. I think the first lesson, and probably the most important lesson, I think before going through this experience, if you'd asked me, I probably would have said, I think I'm a really good parent. And there would be a tremendous amount of pride and maybe a little bit of arrogance about that. And today I say, well, I'm not a good parent and I'm not a bad parent. I'm a parent who is doing the best that she can. And my husband and I feel the same way. He would say the same thing. We are doing the best that we can. And that does a number of things. One, it keeps you watchful and mindful of being present and constantly wanting to improve. I think it also helps you, because I think the natural reaction and the immediate reaction of any parent when a child gets sick is guilt.
Yes.
And one of the things that took us a while to get over was the sense of guilt as to why this was happening. What had we done to contribute to this illness? And we hadn't. Illness happens. Yeah. Again, if your kid gets the measles, you don't say, why did I cause this? But so that was the big important lesson. I think, I said it earlier, I think this is critically important. You cannot, as parents, do this alone. Don't think you can. And you're lucky to live in an environment where there are so many resources available. Find them and avail yourself of them. Mm-hmm. I guess the other thing is you got to recognize that depression specifically, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you've got to be ready to celebrate small incremental improvements in behavior. I mentioned earlier about how confusing it can be to understand the roadmap of the disease. You really have to take each day as it comes, and you have to celebrate the small wins and allow those to give you confidence and hope to keep going.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the whole process is trial and error.
Right.
I know there's some scientific rigor to it, but it really is trial and error relative to other areas of medical study. And you have to be open to be trying things. You have to be open to taking the lead from the patient as to what to do on any given day.
Yeah.
Those are the big lessons, although, there are lots of things that I tell people, smaller things that I've learned along the way.
Right. So I like what you said about how that it's not about being the best parent, but it's about doing your best. And there's a big difference there. One,
Absolutely.
just about identity, where I'm the best parent, where, one's more about the action verb, where I'm doing my best.
Absolutely.
And that makes a huge difference, because when you're doing your best, then you're always thinking of ways of how you can do things better and better. And then I like what you said as well about asking for help and looking for that, which for you, I think in your story was huge, that you went to the therapist, you look for all the resources that can help you. And I find that, people think that they aren't enough, but there are. You just have to look and ask for help. And then the third one that you mentioned, which is, I always talk about this, that even if you make small success, that's huge, because it keeps you going, it keeps you motivated, and that's what it's all about. And I know that we are talking about your daughter, but even doing the small wins every day helps you understand that, hey, I'm doing my best. So it goes back to the first thing, right?
Yeah. And connected to that, celebrating the small things creates, and I think supports, a sense of optimism.
Yes.
And I think when you're going through a circumstance like this, optimism is important. And I also think optimism is contagious to the rest of the family and certainly to the patient. And I think that that's important.
Yes. So what advice would you give to other parents who may be going through the same thing that you had gone through?
Well, I think the natural reaction when you worry about this for parents is to feel helpless and to think that, well, there is nothing that I can do about this. Well, in fact, I believe that parents play an absolutely pivotal role in not only diagnosing the problem, but starting the path to recovery. And they're relatively simple things. And it's everything from what I've said, which is, watch for unusual behavior. When you watch for unusual behavior, and as a parent, you know what feels right and what doesn't, because you've lived with this little person who's become a bigger person for many, many years. And when you start to see changes in behaviors and attitudes and habits and interest levels and all those things, when your spidey sense says something's wrong, it probably is. And then the next thing is, of course, we've talked about it, is seek help. Once you've sought help, think about the support system for you as a parent, as well as the support system for the child. And that support system is everything from close friends and family who you can talk to about this, because I absolutely believe you have to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
And secondly, we chose to go to a therapist. You need some professional help too, to figure out how to deal with all this. You need to stay really active, I think, with the medical community who are supporting your child. You've got to advocate for their treatment. You've got to advocate for, finding the slot in the new program or the new test that they're running. You've really got to, we all naturally, I think, have that sense of protection of our young. Well, this is where it's really got to come to the fore from the standpoint of advocating through what is, it can be a challenging medical system to kind of make your way through.
Yeah.
The simple things are, maintain your family habits. One of the things that was really important to us, it's always been important to us as a family, is we sit down at the dinner table together and have dinner every night. And no matter how sick my daughter was, we had dinner at the table every single night. She came down and she joined us, and it wasn't always the most pleasant, but it was a family routine that we didn't break.
Right.
And I was told later that that was an absolutely important thread to continue to pull on to bring her back to us.
Wow.
And so, if your thing is, Friday night movie nights in the basement with pizza, then don't stop doing them, because that's what makes you a family. So I think you're always looking for ways to let your child know that he or she is still such an important part of the family and is loved and cherished. Don't forget, I talked about personal support network. Don't forget about your own health.
Yeah.
I'm always so struck by, you get on an airplane and they do the emergency briefing and they say, when we lose oxygen in the cabin, the parents put the oxygen mask on first before you put it on your child, because you'll be no help to the child if you've passed out. Well, I think the same is true here. So, watch what you eat. Take a break for yourself. Get some exercise. Go out and have a coffee with friends. Take a break and breathe, because it is a long haul, and you're going to have the resources and the stamina and the courage to continue. Don't forget that, I firmly believe that when a child is sick in a family, or when a child faces depression in a family, the whole family is affected. Mm-hmm. And so if there are other children, siblings to the child who's sick, don't forget them.
Yes.
Remember that they're going through this in their own way too. And, whether it's they're confused as to why their sibling's getting all the attention and jealous, or whether they don't understand why the sibling is behaving in kind of a goofy way, or whether they're just, confused and anxious. Take time, one-on-one time, I think, with the other children to help them know what's going on and give them some attention and give them some help.
Those are great tips, Kathryn, that I like the way that you're actually giving this advice. And I think you have something that you can give to the listeners and viewers as well.
Absolutely.
So I want you to talk about that as well. And, I've been having so much fun listening to you with all the advice that the time has flown as well. And we have a few minutes, but I just want to make sure that you give that gift to others, because anyone going through this, you will need the roadmap that Kathryn has created just for you. So Kathryn, why don't you go ahead and let us know how to get that?
Fabulous. One of the things that I think is so important about dealing with mental health is that we talk about it. And so to your point, I thought it would be helpful if I shared with your listeners the 10 things that I learned that you can do if your child has depression. So for anyone who is interested, if you would like to go to my website is kfitzwilliamconsulting.com. And you'll see a sign up for you to receive 10 things to do if my child has depression. And it's a simple list, many of the things that I've talked about and some others that I think will help you. I think it will help give you some hope. And I think it'll help you feel that you're doing something to help your child.
Yes. So I will put your website in the show notes as well. So if people are just wondering about the spelling, so just make sure you go on the website, which will be on the show notes, to get that list. And if you know of someone who has a child who's going through depression, let them know about this list or the 10 things that they can do, which will really help them. And this is, again, a resource. Just like Kathryn went on to find help, this is a gift that she's giving you. So it's a resource that you can use as well if you have a child going through the same thing that her daughter went through. So Kathryn, like I said, we're almost out of time, but how has this shaped your life now? Just some, ending thoughts here. How has this shaped your life?
Well, I think like most people who have dealt with depression or a family member with a mental illness, there is often a reluctance to talk about it. And one of the things that I made a pledge to do is that in my life, I would begin to share my story with others as appropriate to really help kind of destigmatize the notion of depression and mental illness and some of the mystery around it. And the most extraordinary thing has happened. Every time, in every occasion where I have even quietly mentioned, yes, we've had some depression in the family, and as a parent, I've had to deal with it, even a passing comment like that, in 100% of those occasions, the person I'm talking to says, oh, yes, I've dealt with it too. And they've had a mother, a brother, a sister, a child. It's an issue that we all face. And I think if we all share stories and if we all help one another with strategies about coping with it, I think we'll all have more confidence and more success with dealing with it.
Wonderful. Well, with that, I'd like to give my final thoughts. I'd like to, first of all, thank Kathryn for sharing her story with us. Sometimes it's hard to talk about a family member who's going through something but as a mother, I find sometimes you may not want to talk about it, but thank you, Kathryn, for coming out and sharing your story. And it's a gift that you turn that into a message for others. And I want to thank you, the listeners and the viewers, from the bottom of my heart for taking the time out of your busy, busy schedules to either watch the show or listen to it. Now, go make resilience your first reflex. Until next time, bye now.
Thanks so much for listening to Thrive in Life with your hosts, Zaheen Nanji. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit ZaheenNanji.com. That's ZaheenNanji.com. We'll catch you on the next episode of Thrive in Life.